Hello and welcome to Dear Grief Guide, a podcast where each week I answer one anonymous letter from a listener feeling lost, stuck, heartbroken, or overwhelmed in the midst of grief. My name is Shelby Forsythia. I'm a grief coach and author, and I'm here to help you create a life you love from the life loss forced you to live. Let's get to today's letter. Dear Grief Guide, it's been almost a full week since I lost my brother, and I barely recognize myself. Resentment is bubbling up inside me violently. Friends who promised to support me, who said you can always talk to me, have now vanished. When I did tell them things about my brother's death, they froze, looked at me wide-eyed, and didn't respond at all. Those moments are seared into my mind. And people who don't know about this loss, acquaintances and neighbors who text me like everything is normal, exhaust me with their business-as-usual conversations. I don't have the energy to tell them what happened. Even knowing there are people out there who haven't gone through anything like this fills me with anger I can't explain. The circumstances around this loss were traumatic, which I know is part of why the rage feels so powerful. Everyone in my family's on edge, like we're walking around with exposed nerves, and the smallest thing sets us off. Yesterday, I accidentally offended my mom after she'd accidentally offended me. It feels like we're all stuck in a cycle of hurt. I've lashed out in grief before, but this is beyond anything I have ever felt. I'm afraid of permanently damaging my relationships with everyone around me. Some days, it feels like I could level a small town with the firestorm of thoughts in my mind. That's how big and explosive it all feels. I try to isolate myself when it gets really bad, but I hate being alone. The urge to numb out completely is strong, but I know it won't make this pain go away. I have daydreams about sedating myself so I don't have to feel like this. How do I survive my brother's death without burning every bridge I have left? Signed, Scorched and Seething. All right, Scorched and Seething, I'm going to tell you something that might feel counterintuitive by society standards, but it works for grief, so here we go. Number 1, express your rage. Get it out of your body. Get it the hell out of there. I talk about this a lot, but when my mom was dying, when my best friend died, and when the election results of 2024 came in, I was screaming. God found me screaming. Like all out battle cry, rage against the machine, screaming. Like neighbors call the cops on me, screaming. I did this in several different places. When my mom was dying, I would put myself in the cab of my dad's pickup truck in the garage. It was off. It was winter time. It was insulated from everybody else who was in the house who could hear me, and I just yelled and pounded the dashboard and screamed until either I had a headache or till I felt like I was done, usually 10 to 15 or so minutes. Sometimes anger would act like a trap door for me and give way to sobbing, which is something I feel I also needed at the time. When the election results of 2024 came out, my wife and I walked to a pier out here in Chicago and just hurled ourselves against the, what do you call it, the guardrail, the little boundary marker, and yelled at the water. The lake can take it. The lake has so much space for my rage. And we actually had somebody walk up to us and ask if they could scream with us too, because their rage was so felt and so profound that morning after too. So, if you have access to a parked car, if you live close to a wooded area or a field that is not trespassing on somebody else's property, great. If you have access to a dock or a beach near the water where it feels like you could remove yourself slightly from society as to not activate other people's trauma responses or have somebody call the police on you, great option. You could also do anger with others. Things like kickboxing classes are fantastic. You could get a bunch of friends together or even your family members together. You mentioned your mom, and write things on plates and then break them. I have a very dear group of friends who in college, after one of them had a really bad breakup, they bought a bunch of plates from our local thrift store, like $1 a piece, and wrote awful things on them about the person that had just broken up with them and the relationship dissolved and they were kind of an a-hole, and went to the top of a mountain and just threw the plates off the mountain. I'm not saying litter off a mountain, so maybe find a place where you can clean up after yourselves, but the cathartic act of hurling something over a rock and hearing it smash was very, very anger releasing at a time when she really needed that. You could also go to a lake or to a pond, or freeze a bunch of blocks of ice in your freezer and break ice with a hammer safely. Again, please wear some eye protection. You could stomp cardboard. There are a lot of places, if you want to give back to the community, flower shops, grocery stores, bakeries, they go through boxes and boxes and boxes of supplies a day, and often need people to break down those boxes so that they can be safely recycled. You could volunteer to do that. I'm making some stretches and some reaches here, but you speak of not wanting to be alone, and a fantastic way to give to community but also release rage is to break down some boxes. I spent 6 years of my life as a florist here in Chicago, and smashing boxes sometimes was the best way we coped with difficult customers, life in general, just to release things that our body is holding. Our bodies are very smart. They know that rage is something that needs to exit the body, that they are being called upon almost to get this electricity grounded, like lightning tries to get to the ground as quickly as possible. Our bodies are like, how can I get rage out as quickly, efficiently, and with my disclaimer safely as possible? This is kind of a new phenomenon, but you might look up something like a rage room, where you pay like anywhere between $25 to $50 to put on a jumpsuit and some glasses and to smash vases and axe down computers and just kind of break a bunch of non-toxic, non-harmful stuff and throw your weight into it. You might also find that interactive activities, again, like kickboxing or something even more in tune with your body-esque, like dancing, salsa dancing, bachata, pole dancing, where you are flinging yourself against an object. Great, great way to express rage. And sports are a great way to express rage too. So if you're on a team or you played once, get back into it, because sometimes your body making contact with somebody else's for the sake of winning something or the sake of achieving a goal is one way that rage can leave the body. Just being mindful that you're not there to hurt other people. You are there to play a game and to get the byproduct of physically expressing some rage. Because here's the thing, we live in a society that demonizes anger and suggests that being angry or expressing rage is somehow uncivilized or improper or unhinged, or that you're crazy. But I gotta tell you that in my experience, every single grieving person I've talked with, and even observing myself, anger is a very rational, logical response to loss. Loss of any kind is inherently unfair, unjust, and anger is a response to unfairness or injustice. Even if the person who died was a good person, or they lived a long life, or you can make sense of being at peace with their loss, it's still not fair that people die. Anger does not have to be rational. The response of anger to grief sure is rational, but the anger itself does not have to be rooted in a rational place or rooted in a rational story. Someone you were in relationship with, someone you were attached to, someone you knew, someone you were bonded with in some way is no longer here. And regardless of if your relationship with them was good or bad, it makes sense that you are angry when they're gone. Especially in your case, Scorched, where this loss was traumatic. I can assume it was also sudden. It may have had a component of some tragedy or some violence. All the more reason to pile anger on to that awful layer cake that you were experiencing. So I say, go against society's grain. Let the anger out through whatever way feels the most expressive, feels the most possible, feels the most safe, and feels the most kind of urgently doable. Because I hear that you are in a state of crisis right now. You are like, I am so full of rage, I am ready to set fire to everyone and everything from a metaphorical perspective. There is no way that I am getting through this without rage. And so my response to that is give the rage somewhere to go, because that is what it is asking of you, is to give me an outlet in your life to channel this lightning into, for lack of better phrasing. I want to pivot really quickly and speak to your relationship with your mom. I don't know if you live with her, or you live near her, or you're interacting with her on a regular basis, but I would really encourage the two of you, and you might have to be the person to instigate this, to come up with a code word for when your anger or sensitivity responses are activated. You could use something very obvious like eggshells, like, oop, eggshells. We're walking on eggshells around each other right now because this is so nerve exposing. Or you could be like, oh, anger, red alert, red flag, pause. We got something about this conversation needs to take a breath in the moment. And when either of you says that word and you both have to agree to this in order for it to work, pause, take a few deep breaths. You might even have to leave the room and find different words for what you're trying to relay before returning to the conversation. Maybe set a timer, say, I need to take a deep breath. That landed with me in a way that was really weird or really unpleasant or made me really angry. Red alert, whatever your code word is. I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'll meet you back here at 12:15. And I'm going to try saying this again, or I'm going to try receiving this again, and I hope you can find a different way to say that to me. These are things we can ask of each other when we're deeply grieving, especially if we're both grieving somebody within the same family or same friend group or same group of coworkers, is to come up with a code word to respect the fact that all of us are kind of on nervous system high alert right now, because that is also a really common response to grief. And what you're doing in doing this is establishing that each of you is approaching conversations in good faith and everybody's doing the freaking best they can to survive this, but sometimes the best we can still hurts. You might even do this, establish this first ground rule or first code word in the presence of a counselor or family mediator. Even a single session can help you navigate grief and figure out how to work with and around each other without feeling like you're constantly on eggshells, or as they say, you're like constantly pussyfooting around, or feeling like a stranger in your own home when you should not have to when you're grieving. Your home should be the safest place when you're grieving. So even one session with somebody who can look at both of you and say, I see how you're trying to communicate. Let's come up with a code word and a plan and then execute it over and over and over again, can help you speak to each other more effectively and less offensively as you mourned the death of your brother and presumably your mother's son together. The final thing I want to share with you is something that anger has taught me, and I learned this by way of my friend Gabby Valdez, who is a dating and relationship coach back in the day. And she framed it as, after a breakup, often, the things you are most angry about can show you what you care about most. In other words, heartbreak is a doorway to your values. And I have extrapolated that out to mean anger is a doorway to your values. When something is unjust or unfair, aka we're having some sort of anger response to it, the flip side of that coin is something we care about. So maybe you are upset and angry that your brother is no longer here. The flip side of that coin is that you really loved your brother and you miss his presence in your life. You value the connection that you had with him. You might believe that no one should have to die young. That's a value you hold, is that no one should have to experience death at this age. You might also be angry that friends who say, I'm here for you through everything. You can share anything you want with me, whatever you need, and then back away wide-eyed in fear from things that you share with them. That's anger-inducing. That's betrayal of a sort. And the other side of that coin is I value friends who mean what they say. I value friends who can sit with me in grief. And it is anger-inducing to not have access to that right now. So sitting for a moment with these questions of what about this is breaking my heart? What is anger showing me that I care deeply about? Can help you find, if you're looking for it, or if you would like to look for it at this point in time, if you feel ready to do that, for some meaning, for some greater message underneath the white-hot burning rage that is anger. And after doing these exercises, breaking plates, screaming in a car, smashing glass in a rage room, playing sports, after any time that you get the opportunity to release rage, I hope that you will put your hand on your heart and remind yourself that it's okay to care this deeply. It's okay to feel this deeply. I know it can feel scary. I don't know your gender, but sometimes especially, well, as women, as men, as non-binary folks, it can be terrifying to recognize how much rage lives inside of us We can be afraid of our own selves and our own power, but anger is not here to hurt you. I need you to hear that very clearly. Anger is not here to hurt you. It is serving as a messenger of something you care deeply about that is lost, that has been taken away, that has been betrayed, that has been stolen, that has been robbed from you. There are so many arrows that anger points you towards. And expressing the anger is the first step. And then asking questions of the anger, getting curious about the anger, is that step 2 that can help you feel as if I am fully processing what it means to me to be angry. Rage ain't for nothing. Anger is not for nothing. It is oftentimes one of the loudest and most destructive, but most helpful and most clear messages we can have in our grief. It is not here to play games. It is here to burn shit down and tell you what that means. It is here to sift through the ashes with you and say, hey, here's what's underneath this and why it matters. I need you to know, scorched and seething, that not only is it okay to care, but it's okay to feel anger and to have anger be your expression of care, at least right now in your grief. It is more than normal to give a shit at this level, or to feel like you give no shits at this level and want to just burn it all down. It makes sense that your rage is this loud after what you've been through. I hope that you will write me back and tell me how expressing your anger, well, what you did to express your anger, but then also how expressing your anger got you more in tune with what your anger wants you to know and with what your grief would like you to do next. Good luck. That's all for this episode of Dear Grief Guide. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're feeling lost, stuck, heartbroken, or overwhelmed in the midst of your own grief, check out my free workshop, Grow Through Grief: 3 ways to stop feeling stuck and start moving forward. I'll give you 3 easy, actionable tools for navigating life after loss and show you how you can create peace, stability, and compassion right there in the middle of grief's confusion and uncertainty. You can find the workshop link in the show notes. If this podcast helped you feel a little less alone in your grief, please subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And be sure to share Dear Grief Guide with a friend, because you never know what someone you love is going through. You can submit your anonymous letter for the show and find additional grief support at shelbyforsythia.com. Music for Dear Grief Guide is performed by Addie Goldstein. Editing by Rue Spence of Synivia. Until next time, I see you. I am so proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.